Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will.
All right. Welcome into Lombardi's Legends podcast for a new season. I am Wags, and joining me, as always, is my co-host Dane. And we are so excited here this evening to be able to finally start off our first regular season preview. Green Bay Packers are going to be headed to Chicago in week 1 to take on our most hated rivals to the south, the Chicago Bears. So, folks, thanks you so much for joining us here. I've got Dane joining me here on IG here momentarily. We are live streaming tonight. So if you're on with us live, go ahead and give us a shout out and put something in the chat too. Say hello. And give us some thoughts and predictions on what you expect to see from the Packers here in week 1 as we get into our preview here for this weekend. So, Dane, first of all, how are you doing here this evening?
Good, man. I'm doing great. How you doing? It's happy. It's real football time. We've been talking preseason football, which we love to do. We love everything about it. But I'll tell you what, there's something about week 1. There's something about, games that matter. And certainly there's something about Packers, Chicago Bears, the oldest rivalry in football. Man, we've been waiting 7-8 months for this. So I'm ready for some Packer football, man. I'm excited to get into this with you today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. So we always head right into our previews with injury report. Then we'll get into the offensive preview. Just looking at some of the key matchups for the Packers on the offensive side of the ball against the Bears on the defensive side of the ball. Then we'll get into the defensive side and the Bears offense, X factors and score predictions. So for those of you that are with us here live, go ahead and throw in some thoughts into the chat, as I said before, kind of following that format as we get into things. But Dane, before we get into that, since this is the start of a new era in Green Bay, I think it would be, remiss of us to not go ahead and just give our overall thoughts on the Packers breaking camp here and headed into the regular season. I know a lot of Packer fans, probably rightfully so, have pretty realistic expectations for this season, but are cautiously optimistic and hoping that we can turn things over and compete and make it into the playoffs like we're used to doing every year in Green Bay. So that said, Dane, I'm just going to turn it over to you. Are you more optimistic, less optimistic, or about the same as what you were headed into camp before the preseason started?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm pretty hyped. I think it's changing in the guard, right? So no doubt about it. Make no mistake. The expectations aren't probably what they were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, coming off an NFC Championship game. But it's a different kind of expectation, I think, going into this, right? It's a new era. In large part, I feel like this is almost the first year we get to see Matt LaFleur be Matt LaFleur offensively, the offensive mind of who Matt LaFleur is, right? So my expectations going into this year, I still expect playoffs. I'm not going to lie. I expect this Packer team to be gritty. I expect this team to have an edge to them. This is a Packers team that I think is going to have a completely different identity by necessity. For the last number of years, I feel like nationally and even in Wisconsin and Green Bay, it was Aaron Rodgers, ... and the Green Bay Packers. Now it's the Green Bay Packers. And Jordan Love is leading that charge along with Matt LaFleur, but also we've got a defense that is talented yet unproven. We have a lot of young talent on the offensive side of the ball. So Wags, to answer your question, my expectations are high. I'm not coming into the season going, you know what, let's just chalk it up and I hope we win some games. Like, that's not where I'm at. I expect to see this team grow together. I expect this team to be clean. from a penalties perspective. I expect this team to be well coached from Coach LaFleur and the rest of the organization. And I expect for Jordan Love to get better as the season progresses, because that's the expectation in Green Bay. I don't care who your quarterback is. We have enough talent in this team and in this division to make some noise and win some football games.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm answering my own question. I'm more optimistic than I was at the start of camp. I think part of that is Jordan Love has outperformed what I thought he would. He started camp a little up and down in the first week or so, but I think he's been really steady to just actually really good ever since then, and has really been better and better over the course of camp. One other thing that gives me some optimism, Dane, is, and this is a knock on wood thing because it can change in a hurry, is the relative health of this roster. And I know we'll get into the injury report here, so maybe that's a good segue. Certainly, we've got some guys dinged up, particularly in the wide receiver position, headed into this game. But just big picture, I mean, if you would have told me that Rashawn Gary looks like he's going to be playing in week one, I don't think we knew that for sure heading into training camp. If you would have told me that David Bakhtiari looks like they're just going to manage him and his practice reps and just go into Sunday and at least to start the season, we're looking pretty good there, I would have taken that. So, and I think overall we avoided some really big, significant injuries, at least in training camp. Injuries are going to happen in football, but I'm pleased to see that Devondre Campbell looks like he'll be ready to go to start the season. That was kind of a hold your breath moment where when we found out that he was in a walking boot, it's like, okay, here you go. Or here we go. But I think those are some things that can bode well for a young team. And if we're able to go out and start the season strong, the schedule, dare I say, actually works in the Packers' favor early in the season. Now, you're going to have to go out there and play well to win any game in this league. But there's going to be opportunities there, I think, for the Packers to be able to make their mark and be competitive and right in the thick of things by the time we're at the end of this season. So Dane, with that said, why don't we get into the injury report? We don't have a lot of ground to cover, but I think it's important to kind of set the context and set the table here. So first of all, wide receivers for the Packers. We knew Romeo Doubs nursing a hamstring. So he has been on the injury report to start things off. Surprise yesterday, though, was Christian Watson joining him on the injury report. And so we could be looking at a couple of our top receivers perhaps not being ready to go by Sunday. Now, Doubs was a limited participant today, so he's trending in the right direction. And it sounded like he was probably going to have a pretty good shot of playing by Sunday, but Christian Watson still did not practice at all today. So, Dane, just overall thoughts on how that could impact our week one game plan right off the bat.
I mean, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. This is already a wide receiver group that's inexperienced. And, the last thing we need, I think, are injuries. And especially if you look at the depth behind them, I mean, there's a real chance that somebody like Malik Heath plays real snaps to begin with, but with an injury on the outside to somebody like a Christian Watson, if Christian's unable to go, it's massive. I mean, Malik Heath, we love the guy, but he's an undrafted wide receiver this year. And there's a real chance it's he and Samori Toure on the outside, right? Along with maybe a limited Romeo Doubs. And, Hicks also has a hamstring, also a 5th round rookie, right? I mean, the inexperience is very clear there, especially when we're seeing these injuries. So what more can you say other than I'm pleased that Romeo Doubs is back, even in a limited fashion. I'm happy about that. But I'm alarmed, to say the least, with Christian Watson, especially when we start talking about those soft tissue injuries we talk about all the time. Hamstring injuries are so difficult to really get a handle on. So hopefully it's nothing serious. Hopefully it's a precaution and Christian's able to go full bore come Sunday, because if not, it does certainly limit one of our most explosive weapons on offense.
Yeah, and on the Bears side, I think the biggest injuries, interestingly, are in the secondary. But both guys that you really would be looking at, and Jaquan Brisker and Eddie Jackson. Brisker's got a groin, and Jackson has an ankle. Were full participants in practice today, so it looks like they're going to be out there. Talented players in the secondary for Chicago. So that said, those are positions that they're going to need to be full speed, certainly, regardless of who the Packers trot out there to face across them in the line of scrimmage. So if they're not 100% or anything gets tweaked, respectively with either of those injuries, that could be a little bit of a neutralizing effect. Now, we're not cheering for injuries, but it's just interesting that probably the biggest injuries for Chicago and really most everyone else is going to be ready to go. Backup linebacker Dylan Cole hasn't been practicing this week with a hamstring, but I don't really see that as too big of an impact when you're looking at this game as a whole. So,
and Wags, I hate to chime in here live. My dog is missing, it sounds like. I just got word. If you please excuse me for a moment while I try to sort this out. This is live, folks, so apologies. But I've gotten word that our dog slipped a collar, so I'm going to have to come right back in a moment.
And if anybody's local and you know Winnie in the neighborhood, let's return him back safely. So that's no problem. We'll keep going here. I'll do the best I can as a one-man show with this preview. So yeah, so I think when it comes to injuries, certainly it looks like the Packers are going to have the higher impact if neither or both Christian Watson or Dobbs are able to go. But certainly it's a good news on Dobbs's front that he was able to be a limited participant today. So we'll be tracking that closely as we go into practice Friday, as certainly we are recording here Thursday evening. So, all right, well, let's move over then to the offensive side of the ball for the Packers against this Bears defense. And Bears defensively went out and they signed a bunch of guys in free agency to try to shore things up, particularly in the middle of that defense. Big signing was Tremaine Edmonds, but TJ Edwards signed. Badger fans will be familiar with him, has had a couple of good seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles. Tremaine Edmonds, of course, Pro Bowl player, comes over from the Bills. Both guys are just tackle machines. So, the Bears have traditionally loved to have impact players at the linebacker position. And then, of course, former Badger Jack Sanborn will also be manning a linebacker position in the Bears 4-3 defense. In addition to that, a big signing, I think maybe the biggest signing was Yannick Ngakoue as to be the pass rusher here for the Bears. Comes over from the Colts, certainly has some familiarity with Coach Eberflus. So some talent here, influx for the Bears on the defensive side of the ball. They, in the draft, took a couple of defensive tackles in Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens in the second round. So pretty high draft picks on the defensive line. Remains to be seen how many snaps those guys will be getting starting here week 1 on Sunday. But it's a little bit of a different look for this Bears defense. And then, of course, mentioning Eddie Jackson and Brisker, along with Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon in the secondary. So Bears have some guys, young defense. I think it's certainly on paper looks a lot stronger going into the season than what they were last year. They were young and I don't think they had too many impact players last year. They really got ran on a lot. So I think clearly the plan here in Chicago was to shore up front and get some guys on that second level that could clean up in that run game. So the Bears are looking to be stronger against the run. Now, conversely, this is a Packer team that with Jordan Love, limited experience, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they're going to be trying to establish more of a run game. So it's going to be interesting to see what type of balance we get starting here in week 1 and how much they're going to have to lean on Jordan, try to throw the ball, depending on certain down and distance situations they're going to get. So if you're the Bears, really, I think what you're going to try to do is the key focus has got to be Aaron Jones. And so Aaron Jones, last year, at times, it seemed like the Packers got away from him. First series, scripted plays. He'd get 3, 4, 5 carries, comes right out the gate strong, and it looks like he's going to have a great game. And then all of a sudden, he disappears for the second, third quarter. And you look down and you realize Aaron Jones has only got 7 carries so far for the game, headed into the fourth quarter. And Coach LaFleur comes to the press conference post game, says he's got to get Aaron Jones the ball more. Well, I think starting week 1 here, the Packers need to set the tone. Certainly we'll have a good dose of AJ Dillon running the ball, but if we don't have Christian Watson, we don't have Romeo Doubs at full strength and maybe not able to go for his normal number of snaps on Sunday, I look for Aaron Jones to really be the guy to be that pressure release valve. So is he going to be able to get the ball in those passing situations, pick up 7, 8, 9 yards, and be that guy that can move the chains when they really need someone to be able to move the sticks? And so I look at this game plan potentially is similar to a couple of seasons ago when the Packers went down into Arizona. The Cardinals were actually really good just 2 years ago, 7-0, and they go down to Arizona. Davante Adams and Allen Lazard are out that game due to COVID. And so now we've got a situation where we're down our top 2 receivers. And I get it. Jordan Love is not going to immediately in game 1 carry this offense. I don't think that would be a realistic expectation. And adjust to but it's really more about the young receivers that we might have to slide in there. That was a game that at the end of the game, Aaron Jones was the only guy that had over 50 yards receiving, and no one else had more than 4 receptions. So it could be similar this week between Jones and Dillon. They combined to rush the ball over 30 times, really tried to control the tempo, get the run game going, and then just be opportunistic in the short pass game to try to move the chains when they had those opportunities to do so. So from that perspective, I would not be surprised to see Coach LaFleur have that as a backup game plan, because without Christian Watson, you could send Samori Toure deep. But realistically, we don't have that field stretcher that can come in and really put a lot of pressure on this Bears defense, not only down the field vertically, but sideline to sideline, and really stretch the defense in some of the looks that you can get with Christian Watson running the ball on some of those end arounds. So it's going to be incumbent, I think, on Aaron Jones to be ready for a heavier workload this week, both running the ball and as a receiver. And then we're going to need to see if these young tight ends are ready to go right off the bat, particularly Luke Musgrave. This is an opportunity, I think, with this matchup. You've got Tremaine Edmonds and Luke Musgrave, the rookie tight end. And how many looks can Luke Musgrave get open against this stout second level of the Bears? And if Musgrave is able to do that, I think we've got some opportunities to maybe, I don't want to say dink and dunk, but he can stretch the field over the middle. And then you've got Jayden Reed from the slot, maybe kind of on some crossing patterns. That could give that second level of the Bears, as talented as they are, probably not the most speed at the linebacker position. So you got to work with what you have. And so I like that combination of Musgrave and Jayden Reed to potentially cause some complications and try to get some openings on the second level in the pass game as well. So Dane, welcome back. We've been talking some key matchups here, Packers offense against the Bears defense. I hope your return means it's good news on the puppy front. So
the dog is back. The dog is in the house. We're good.
All right, fantastic. So, Dane, I won't recap everything I just said since you have no idea what ground I just covered. But really, I think in a nutshell, we're looking at key matchups. I made the analogy of this could be similar to when the Packers went to Arizona a couple of years ago without their top 2 receivers in Davante Adams and Allen Lazard. And it was a heavy dose of Aaron Jones in that game. He led the team in receiving. He led the team in rushing. The Packers ran the ball over 30 times in that game, and they really just tried to be opportunistic. Rodgers was not the most efficient passing in that game, as you might imagine, but the Packers tried to use the short passing game to create some mismatch and find some openings. So without their field stretcher in Christian Watson, if he's unable to go, I wouldn't be shocked if we had a similar type of game plan this week against Chicago.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I look at some of the additions, Chicago Bears defense, if we're talking Packer offense, right? And the matchup, TJ Edwards, who anybody from Wisconsin probably is very familiar with, former Wisconsin Badger, came over from the Philadelphia Eagles. And then you got Tremaine Edmonds, also a really strong addition, the inside. But where they're lacking, I think, Wags, as good as they are between the tackles, making tackles, and in space and otherwise, I think that I will take Aaron Jones in a foot race against TJ Edwards or Tremaine Edmonds any day of the week. So in addition to kind of running the ball, which is going to have to be a primary focus, don't be surprised if Jordan Love also uses his legs a little bit and gets outside. So even if we're doing some RPO, right, some run pass option plays early on in the game, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of trickery at the line of scrimmage as well. A fair amount of guys going in motion, a lot of just busy work early on, making the Chicago Bears, especially some of these new Chicago Bears, identifying what the Packers are trying to accomplish. It just wouldn't surprise me if Matt LaFleur throws some extra wrinkles at them early on. But we aren't used to, over the last couple of years, a scrambling quarterback. And I really think Jordan Love is going to be using his legs as well in this game. So yes, Aaron Jones, heavy dose of Jones. I think a fairly heavy dose of AJ Dillon as well, although this does feel like more of an AJ or Aaron Jones type performance. But Jordan Love as well. I think he's going to use his arm, but he's also going to use his legs. And I like his ability, even with this improved Chicago Bear defense, and they are very much improved, I think, on paper. They still have to show up and play. And week one, I think oftentimes we find defense is a little, defense can be ahead of the offense, but with some of these new moving parts here in Chicago, don't be surprised if the Packers try to, prey on some miscommunication early on, especially early in the game. So maybe some over aggression, and Jordan Love can maybe make some safe early throws and settle himself in.
Yeah, and I think we're talking a lot about the skill position guys, but let's be honest. The trenches is where I'm really going to be watching, because this is a young Bears defense. As you said, I highlighted a bunch of the guys they brought in, and you just mentioned a couple of them again. But this Bears defensive line, I don't think really stacks up all that well against this Packer offensive line. Certainly the prize there is Ngakoue, but I'm not terribly concerned about him this week, because I just feel like this Packer offensive line is, if we stay healthy, going to be having an advantage not only this week but most weeks of the season. So I'm really eager to see what type of tempo and what type of cadence and level of physicality that the Packers offensive line and their defensive line, for that matter, can set at the line of scrimmage. Because if they're able to get some room running early, it really takes a lot of pressure off of Jordan Love. And so, it's not an advantage, certainly, to be missing your top two receivers and have both those guys at less than 100%. But let's be honest, even if both of those guys were playing, it wouldn't matter at all if this Packer offensive line does not play well starting right away on Sunday. And so that's going to be the key this week and every week moving forward. So I'm really looking forward to seeing not only what this Packer offensive line can do in that run game, but how well they can protect Jordan Love. Because to your point, if they are able to keep a clean pocket, I don't care how talented guys are on the defensive side of the ball, or how much talent we might be missing from the skill positions on the offensive side of the ball. They can't cover guys forever. And if Jordan Love is a little bit mobile, he can kind of move around a bit. But if he can stay in the pocket and feel like he's got plenty of time to throw, then he can get comfortable. And I've got a lot of confidence that he's going to be able to find some open guys and hit some targets. So it doesn't need to be a 250 to 300 yard pass game for Jordan Love. I'm just really eager to see what this offense looks like. And what type of balance we're able to have between the run and pass, what we're doing on third down in short third down and long situations. When it's 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3, is our quarterback still going to be throwing it deep, or are we going to be trying to move the chains first and foremost? So it's just going to be an interesting look. I think this is going to be a much different look and feel for the Packer offense. Are they going to go down and set the world on fire offensively? No, I don't think so. But heck, even if you're able to move the chains a few times, if you got to punt the ball, you get field position. That could be a key component of this game. It gives defense the time to rest and be off the field. And it puts a lot of pressure on this Bears offense. Let's face it. I think they've got a lot more to try to prove than the Packers do on both sides of the ball, to be honest with you. I think this game means more for the Chicago Bears and their fans than it will in the grand scheme of things. I'm not saying that the Packers aren't going to be putting their all into this game, but in the grand scheme of things, if the Bears lose this week against the Packers and this Packer offense comes out and establishes themselves, I think that's going to be very, very disheartening for the Bears, and it's just going to be something that's going to be a boon for this Packers team.
What do you make of that? I mean, so we're not used to it. We've beaten up on the Bears, I think, the last 8 times or so, and a ton in Matt LaFleur era. So what do you make of that and the mindset of this Packer offense going in there? Because there's always pressure in the NFL. Yeah, it's Jordan Love's first game, but you know what? If you listen to the national pundits, everybody's kind of writing off the team. I mean, is that something that this Packer offense can maybe feed off of to a certain extent? Because I'm seeing some of the stuff coming out of the Bears locker room. I saw one of the guys today was talking about, it's our time now and we're going to beat up on the Pack and all that stuff. And I know that once the whistle blows, the game starts, a lot of that stuff goes out the window, but expectations are low. And, if Jordan Love can continue that kind of hot pace that we saw in preseason, I think he could really take some people by surprise. So I'm kind of curious, do you buy into any of that yourself, that maybe lower expectations of this Packer offense? They might have something out there to prove and maybe come in with a little more chip on their shoulder than at least the national media is giving them credit for.
Yeah, I think, really what I want to see is that they have some rhythm early, and it may not translate into touchdowns on all of those possessions, as I just said earlier. And can Jordan prevent himself from putting himself in a situation where he forces the ball into a window and it goes into 6 the other way? So those are the things that, as an inexperienced quarterback coming into his first real start, let's be honest, I know he started against the Chiefs a couple seasons ago in the regular season, that's I think going to be the biggest thing is just to get some of those butterflies out, establish a good solid run game, get some first downs. Maybe if you can go down and get a field goal in that first series, that would be a big win, and then just settle in from there. If we can, I think, trade possessions and the defense can hold things together. That's what I'm looking for is I think we've got the offensive line to impose our will late in the game if it's a close game. What we can't have is to fall behind. If we start playing from behind by a significant amount, that's going to immediately put a lot more pressure on Jordan Love. And now we've got a situation where we've got really young receivers with inexperience, and mistakes start to compound themselves and they can pile up a little bit. So let's just keep this game plan manageable. Don't try to get cute. Let's try to go out there and execute from a physical standpoint at the line of scrimmage. Don't be afraid to punt. Sometimes that can be an advantage out of short-term failure. So we're just going to have to be patient, I think, with this offense. But I think Jordan can go out there. If he continues to do what we saw in the preseason, there's no reason not to have really optimistic and solid expectations for what he can do right away here in week 1 against the Bears. Dane, I think let's transition over to the Bears offense against this Packer defense. And I think a lot of people might say this could be where this game is won or lost. And so it's all about Justin Fields in Chicago these days. But this Bears offense, similarly to their defense, made some big upgrades, some of them during the season last year with the trading, certainly for Chase Claypool, but also they traded the big trade of the draft was the Bears acquiring DJ Moore at wide receiver. So last year it was Darnell Mooney, its number 1 receiver, and Equanimeous St. Brown as the number 2. So this year that skill position group looks quite a bit different for the Bears. Then on the offensive line, similar, they made some big changes there for the Bears as well. When you look at their first round pick, number 10 pick in Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. So he's going to be on the right tackle. And then free agent acquisition, Nate Davis at right guard, played a bunch of seasons for the Titans, started a lot of games for Tennessee. So I think they're really looking to, on paper, stabilize things quite a bit. But I'm just curious, Dane, just to take a step back, big picture here. What is the biggest key for you when you're assessing what this Packer defense needs to do to go into week 1 and try to neutralize Justin Fields and this Bears offense?
So Justin, for as good as he is with his legs, there's downside too, right? He's had some challenges passing the football. He's also not afraid to turn the ball over in his first couple of years. He's a very, very talented young quarterback. There's no denying that. But Wags, I think it comes down to a couple of things. Number one is all training camp and the preseason as well. One thing that I've noticed is a significant uptick in aggressive play by the defense and by the scheme, particularly inside linebacker, watching them blitz, having them showing a bunch of different looks, both with Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker out of that inside. And Quay Walker, I thought last year showed a lot of ability as a pass rusher. So that's number one. Number two, watching these corners playing a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, playing a little bit closer to, pressing these wide receivers up close, something I think that we were all pining for last year. And my understanding is at the end of the season, last season, a lot of the DBs and a lot of the guys on the defense talked with Coach Barry and we're talking about, hey, we need to be more aggressive. We need to be a little bit more in your face. And by all appearances, at least thus far, we've seen that in preseason. We've seen that throughout training camp. So all of that's to say, Wags, I think that a more aggressive approach from the defense, not being afraid to make a mistake, letting our playmakers try to make plays is going to be a huge part of that. But number two, you talk about the upgrade on the offensive line to the Chicago Bears. It's always going to come down to what's going on up front with this Packers defensive line as well. We know who Kenny Clark is, but now we've got Devonte Wyatt coming into year 2. We're leaning on him. He was a first-round pick last year. Devonte Wyatt has to be the guy that we think he can be. He's shown a ton of flashes last year when he had opportunity. I think he's really looked the part all training camp long, but also TJ Slayton up front, some of these young guys that are coming in. So can this defensive line hold up against this new and improved Chicago Bears offensive line? Can they stop the run, get Justin Fields into some passing downs, and where he does make some of those mistakes? And then from there, can our edge, which I think is probably the deepest spot of this entire team, that the edge position, can they pin their ears back and can they stay in the right position, do their job, set the edge when they need to, and force some pressure on Justin Fields and keep him contained. Those are some big ifs because Justin Fields has shown that he can run all over the damn field when he's, breaks contain. But I think the Packers have the guys and the tools to keep Justin Fields in check with running, with his legs, running the ball. But I think it needs to start up front with the defensive line, and we need to have an aggressive approach. I want to punch these wide receivers in the mouth. I want to see these DBs, be very, very active. And I want to see Coach Barry let our edges and our inside linebackers rip and apply pressure early and often to Justin Fields. Don't be afraid of his legs. Make him run, make him make mistakes, and make him use that arm, because he's proven in his first few years in the league, when he uses his arm, he tends to give the ball away, particularly to Jair Alexander and other guys on this defense. He does turn that ball over. Let's force him into some positions where he has to make a throw, and we can force an error.
Yeah. I agree. I love everything you just said. And for me, it's really simple. The main thing you said that I think stands out is make Justin Fields throw the ball. He can do it with the legs. And so it's going to be interesting. It's always a test with a quarterback like Justin Fields. I think you have to be able to get some pressure, but to your point, you don't want to break contain. So at what cost? One of the things that's really interesting is Justin Fields really didn't use his running backs as a release valve in the pass game. He just used his legs the majority of the time last season. And so I'm really curious to see if that's something that they might try to incorporate a little bit more to keep him fresh, and maybe to get a little bit of a rhythm to complete some of those short passes. Let the running backs do some of that work to try to gain some of the short yardage down and distance situations. Certainly Khalil Herbert, I think, has the capability to do that. A guy I know that Bears fans are really high on, that they took the young running back in Roschon Johnson. I'm not sure what his capabilities are as a pass receiver, but certainly they're going to try to, I think, mix those guys in. You can talk all you want, if you're a Bears fan, about how amazing DJ Moore is going to be for this offense, but you said it. Justin Fields still needs to complete the ball, even if he does manage to get himself open. So I'm going to be really curious to see, how do the Packers decide to utilize some of their aggressive approaches. I think we saw some of that starting in the second half of the season, where the players and the defensive coaches, namely with Coach Barry, started to seem like they got more on the same page with some of the game plans. Early last season, it didn't feel like a lot of the players were really aligned to the game plan of the defense. So I'm really anxious to see, is Jair Alexander shadowing DJ Moore a little bit? Now, maybe he doesn't follow him all over the field, because they're not going to be in man looks 100% of the time, certainly. But that said, that could be somewhat of a neutralizing factor. I think DJ Moore is a great player, but even if he beats Jair, it's going to be tight windows. I think Rasul Douglas has shown that it's going to take tight windows to beat these guys. And so I want to see Justin Fields have to show and prove that he can deliver the passes into those tight windows. So it's going to be interesting. I think Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell are going to be huge keys in this game for this Packer defense. You mentioned the guys up front. Certainly, it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to be able to rotate some of those young guys in on the defensive line, and Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks, and what that can mean for the Packers later in the game if Justin Fields is still running a little bit, if they're able to keep him in contain versus late in the game, and maybe Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt are gassed because those young guys don't give you as many snaps early in the game. So those are keys, I think, on the defensive line. Get some push up the middle, be disruptive up the middle, contain on the edges, and then Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell, if they can clean up and protect the boundaries on the outside, I've got a lot of confidence that they can do that. I think the Packers defense could look really different this year. And I'm as shaky as we might be to some extent about the safety position. Again, I don't know that the Bears are the team that are going to be able to exploit that. If they do, tip the cap, but I want to make them prove it. Just don't make mistakes where there's a complete breakdown and Darnell Mooney streaking down the sideline and there's no one 15 yards within him. As long as that's not happening, I think the Packers defense matches up extremely well against this Bears offense. And dare I say, as long as we're sound and we don't have those breakdowns, I think we've got a lot of advantages across a lot of these matchups.
I'm extremely excited for this Packers defense, just broadly speaking, not just week one, but they've got to prove it, right? So that's the next thing is I was very, very high on this defense going into last season. And frankly, a little disappointed. As you mentioned, they got hot. I thought later on in the year, I think that they worked with the coaching staff a little bit and things were starting to get figured out. And lo and behold, the Packers won a heck of a lot of football games in a row when the defense started to kind of buy in and work it out a little bit. But I really want to see it kind of transfer and translate and continue into this year. And you mentioned Quay Walker, we both have, but he's a key to this game, Wags. And he's a key to the season, I think. He's a difference maker. We saw him last year. Take out some of the extracurricular stuff that happened with him. And if we're talking purely as a football player, he is extremely talented. He's fast. I thought as he kind of got his sea legs under him as the season progressed, he started to feel more and more comfortable with the defense. He looked really, really good. So he is an absolute key, not only this week, but for the entire season, the success of this team, because I think that he is a difference maker. He can rush the passer. He's a sure tackler, and he's not your prototypical Packer linebacker of past seasons where they're making that tackle 3 yards, 4 yards down the field. He's making the tackle at the line of scrimmage. He's always around the ball. So he's somebody that he's going to be able to take away the tight end group. I know a lot of people like Kmet. Our old pal Robert Tonyan is in Chicago now as well, but I love the matchup of these Green Bay Packer linebackers and these safeties against the tight end group of Chicago. And you mentioned it, skill position wise, I'll match up our corners against pretty much any wide receivers in this league. I think that there's a possibility that Jair and Rasul Douglas alone can be one of the better tandems in this league. Again, they have to prove it. But Wags, this is a great first week test, to be honest with you, going down to Chicago in a challenging territory against your arch rival. What can this defense do? But I really do expect them to come out swinging. I expect a very, very aggressive Packer defense on Sunday.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting what kind of impact Rashawn Gary might have, and he's supposed to be on a pitch count. We'll see. I think we mentioned the defensive line and perhaps having more depth and guys that can work in and stay fresher over the course of 4 quarters. Same is true of that edge group. Obviously, we've got Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary headlining. Looks like Gary is going to play. How many plays is yet to be determined. But the exciting thing is the depth that we have behind them. I think is going to pay dividends, not just with Gary being on a pitch count this week, but in a game like this where they might have to chase quite a bit, both in run defense and in that contain pass defense. So to be able to work in Enigbare, I'm anxious to see how many snaps Van Ness gets out there. Justin Hollins is going to get some snaps out there. So we've got guys to rotate in and be able to take some of the pressure off Gary and Smith, finally, because we've been relying on them so much to play almost all the snaps. And when they've not been in there, this Packer defense just has not been the same. They've gotten gashed whenever those guys have had to come off the field. And now we should hopefully have guys that can come in, and maybe they're not at Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith's level yet, but they should be able to come in for the snaps that they're in there, play really hard football, do the job that they need to do, and perhaps even make some impact plays while they're at it. So I'm excited to see how that pans out here in week 1 as well.
Wags, you mentioned our first round pick, Lucas Van Ness, obviously an edge, but do you see him putting his hand in the dirt at all and also getting some run on the defensive line? He can play all over. He reminds me a lot of Rashawn Gary.
Yeah, he may. We didn't see a ton of it in the preseason, so I guess it really just depends what packages they're trying to run out there. It may be certain down and distances if they want to use him more as a pass rusher on third and long situations. Perhaps he gets a few snaps rotated inside there as well. It may also depend on how many snaps he's going to play on the edge with Gary on a pitch count. So. I think there's lots of different combinations that the Packers can utilize to keep these guys up front and on the edge as fresh as possible. And Dean, you don't have to tell anyone how much of a difference it makes when you're not gassed trying to chase down a guy like Justin Fields, but when you're fresh and you can just go 120% for the snaps that you're out there and know that you've got another guy, a teammate that can come in and spell you. Or if you're a guy like Justin Hollins, or you're a guy like Lucas Van Ness, you're a guy like JJ Enigbare, and you know you're just going to be out there for a couple snaps, you're going to put your hand in the dirt, and that's going to be a long day at the office, I think, for some of these Bears young offensive tackles. Talented but young, so it makes their job a lot harder when they're facing mostly fresh guys down and down out.
I love it, and you're spot on, man. And I think you just throw the kitchen sink at these guys, right? And that's the point of this. That's why you carry 6. Brenton Cox Jr. is too damn good. Couldn't cut the guy. I don't know if he'll be active for week 1. They probably go with 5 to start, unless Rashawn Gary truly is on like a 7-snap or 10-snap pitch count, which he could be. But with this scrambling quarterback like Justin Fields, I'm all aboard, right? I want to be sending inside linebackers. We've seen Keyshawn Nixon coming off the edge as off the slot, right, and blitzing in the preseason. We're seeing different things, and that's the point here with Justin Fields, somebody who has had some trouble when he's had to throw the ball, is with this Green Bay defense, with guys that can do a lot of different things for you. Why not just throw the kitchen sink week 1 at Justin Fields and make him react? He's going to get some plays. He's going to get some chunk plays. But if you're hitting that quarterback and if you're confusing him and you're just throwing a lot of different bodies at him all game long, he's bound to make an error, make a mistake. And that's where I think this is a Packer defense that can be very, very opportunistic.
Yeah, Dane, what do you think, last thing on the defense, how the Packers are going to try to take away or neutralize Cole Kmet? Because I imagine if I'm the Bears, I'm going to try to use him somewhat vertically. That can, really force Campbell and Quay Walker to stay deeper in their drops. But it's really going to be incumbent on our safeties in Darnell Savage and Rudy Ford, I think, to be able to read and react and trust, I think, guys like Rasul and Jair on the boundaries. But communication is going to be key, because if you got Kmet, who I think I'm not super high on, but he can be a talented guy that can stretch the middle for you, then that pulls Packers safeties coverage or protection that they might be giving over the top for guys like Mooney or DJ Moore. So that puts a little bit more pressure, I think, on the guys on the outside. But really, it's just incumbent when they're in more of a zone look, that communication is on point, so that they don't have really, really soft spots in this defense that the Bears are able to exploit. But just curious what your thoughts are on how the Packers might be able to address or deal with a guy like Cole Kmet as well.
It's a make or break year for Darnell Savage Jr. Point blank. He's a guy that has had his ups and downs. I will say that I was pretty impressed late in the year after he was more or less benched, right? Demoted. He was very open about kind of the mental side of the game and talking about he was trying to do too much. And when he started to let the game come back to him and just kind of play his role within the defense, he earned the job back. And I thought he played some really good football down the stretch for this Packers defense. So I think it's going to be incumbent on Darnell Savage Jr. to erase the tight end this week, Cole Kmet, and maybe going forward for this, because I don't think that's Rudy Ford's game. I think Rudy Ford is much more comfortable, and he's a playmaker. He's a ball hawk over the top. He's a guy that I trust over the top a little bit more. I'd like to see Darnell Savage Jr. stick with Cole Kmet more often than not, play within the defense, do his job, not try to do too much. And I honestly, I think the world of Darnell Savage. I really do. I think he has the talent. I think at times he's having trouble putting it all together. We see glimpses of greatness, and then, he'll make an error, or there is a communication issue, or he's just out of position. And this is his year. This is kind of his last chance, I think, in Green Bay to steady himself and seize this job for the long run. But it really does start this week. But I think it's Darnell Savage's job to lose against Cole Kmet and really going forward as this year progresses.
All right, fantastic. Dane, we're running up on 50 minutes here. So why don't we transition then? We've got X factors. But before we do that, just a quick word. What's your confidence level in rookie kicker Anders Carlson heading into week one, into what's not the easiest place to kick in Soldier Field? If this is a game that comes down to a field goal, and we think this will be a close game, how comfortable are you now as we are headed into the regular season? It's been an up and down journey so far with Anders Carlson, but what are your thoughts for his readiness to go out and be successful here, starting with the regular season?
I legitimately don't know. I'm a 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, if I'm being optimistic, because we don't know. The thing with Anders has been that he's missed extra points and then he drills 50-yard field goals, right? I mean, that's kind of been the MO, and that's very, very nerve-wracking, and it's very frustrating. I hope for his sake and for our sake that he hits a chip shot early on just to gain some confidence, and he can build off of that. But we've seen him push the ball consistently right throughout training camp and throughout the preseason. So can he hit the gimmies? Because he does hit some of those big time kicks on the regular, it seems, but it's these gimmies, and frankly, it's even the extra points sometimes that he's had trouble. So my confidence level is I can only go off of what I've seen over the last month and a half. And I'm not 100% confident, if I'm being honest with you. But that can change pretty quickly in the NFL, right? He hits 3 kicks this week and he's looking good. I'm going to be like, man, what are we talking about? Carlson's our guy, but he does have to hit some kicks. And I'm hopeful that for our sake and everybody's sake, that he's steady and he figures out why he's been pushing that ball right. Because even on those extra points, like I said, there's no rhyme or reason. It seems like that first kick of every practice, he seemed to miss one almost. So I don't have a complete understanding of it, but I'm hopeful that he's kind of figured it out over the last couple of weeks.
All right, Dane. So should we get into some X factors and score predictions?
Yeah. Does that not make you confident, Wags? My prediction or my hopes for Anders?
I think it's very reasonable. I don't really have anything else to add to that. So let's move into our X factors. And of course, our X factors are always brought to you by our sponsor, Leap Spirits, paying homage to the iconic end zone celebration that was created by a Green Bay legend. Leap Vodka is inspired by the best attributes of the world's finest vodkas. We're so excited to have Leap Spirits as our sponsor here for another season. So this week and every week's X Factors will be brought to you by Leap Spirits. Find Leap Spirits at a local retailer or restaurant near you. Go to leapspirits.com. So, Dane, I'm going to let you start things off. First X factor of the season. I'll even let you choose if you want to start on the offensive or defensive side of the ball.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to go with a pal of the podcast, Rudy Ford. Rudy Ford is somebody that, has been battling at the safety position. He won the job. Jonathan Owens, I still expect to probably get some snaps on this defense as the year progresses. We're probably rotating 3 safeties at some points in this year, but Rudy Ford earned the job. He's been in the league for a number of years. And last year, when he came to Green Bay, Wags, he popped in some pretty important games. And one of the reasons I'm picking Rudy this week is he has a knack for the football. He has a knack for a football against turnover-prone quarterbacks. And for some reason, he really seems to like getting his hands on the ball against Packer rivals. Last year against the Dallas Cowboys, he had 2 picks. I think he forced a fumble or jumped on a fumble against the Minnesota Vikings. So why not week 1? Justin Fields scrambling around. Why not Rudy Ford sticking his nose in there, getting his hands on a football there? Why not Rudy Ford forcing a fumble? He's a physical player. He runs around like he's a missile out there. And I promise you, earning this starting job, dude is going to be flying around the field on Sunday. This is a huge opportunity in his career to be a starting safety for the Green Bay Packers week 1. So for all of those reasons, Rudy Ford's going to be my X factor, my Leap Spirits X factor on defense this week.
All right, so I'm going to stick with the defensive side, and I'm going to go up front. I've got Devonte Wyatt as my X factor. Certainly got some more opportunities late in the season last year, and I think I'd throw TJ Slaton in there as an honorable mention. I'm really anxious to see what we have in our guys up front next to Kenny Clark. And this Packer defense and this run defense, for that matter, I thought got better and better the more opportunities those guys had to go in there and play, particularly Devonte Wyatt. But I'll tell you what, TJ Slaton has had a great preseason as well at the nose tackle position. So we know what a disruptive force Kenny Clark can be. Can we finally unleash him and play some solid run defense? And it's going to start with Devonte Wyatt and right next to him, TJ Slaton, and then some of those young guys we talked about in Colby Wooden and I'm sorry, my name's missing me right now.
Brooks.
But Brooks, thank you, Carl Brooks. Not in midseason form apparently right now, Dan. But nonetheless, I'm going to stick with Wyatt as my primary X factor on the defensive side of the ball, because I'll tell you what. This is a Bears team that, even with some of those, flashy new pass catchers that they have, they're going to want to try to run the ball. And this is a Kyle Shanahan inspired offense, almost just as much as the Packers are. Luke Getsy running the Bears offense. A lot of similarities. They're not the exact same offense, but I think they're going to be trying to attack each other in a lot of similar ways. And it's going to start with the Bears trying to run the football, not only with Justin Fields, certainly, but with their running backs. And Khalil Herbert is going to get his share of carries early on. So can we keep this Bears offense in longer down and distance situations more often than not? Can we force them into some 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 11s, and get them off the field in those situations? If we're able to do that, a big component of that is going to be what Devonte Wyatt and TJ Slaton are doing up front. And it starts there with this run defense. We've been getting gashed in the run defense for years and years and years. I think that changes this year. And I think Devonte Wyatt is going to be a big component of why that changes. And it's going to start this week on Sunday. Huge. I love it. Leap Spirits, our sponsor. We're throwing out X factors here, folks. And Wags, offensively, Luke Musgrave. Tight end for the Packers has got to be my Leap Spirits X factor on offense. I'm going to tell you why. It's such a difficult position to play. Tight end position, they don't get enough love, man. He's kind of a offensive lineman, some snaps, wide receiver, a couple other snaps, right? And all in a day's work if you're a tight end in the NFL. Rookie tight ends traditionally have a very steep learning curve. And, Luke's getting thrown right into the fire this week on the road against the Chicago Bears. But I love the mismatch. He's got an intriguing possibility of being a very strong mismatch for this Packers offense this year. He's faster than your linebacker. He's bigger than your safety. He reminds me of some really talented tight ends in the National Football League. And so this week 1, how is he looking in line as a blocker? Is he, hitting his assignments on that front? Is he catching the ball? He's got all the talent in the world, but he's had a couple drop issues in the preseason. Is he catching the balls? Is he that security blanket that Jordan Love needs? And up and down the list, right? You could go with the tight end here in week 1, but Musgrave, if he has a strong performance for this Packers team, he could be very surprising. I think Christian Watson, we've talked about the injury. If he's not able to go for him, Dobbs is limited. Packers are looking for other options out there. Musgrave could be that mismatch against Chicago Bears, a sneaky mismatch where the Bears start to go, oh, how did this guy get open again?
right? He's just kind of got that ability. We've got all the potential in the world in Luke Musgrave. Now he has his opportunity to go out and show why the Packers drafted him high, why the Packers have so much faith in him, why they didn't go out and sign Mercedes Lewis again, why they didn't go out and sign another veteran tight end. It's because they think so high of Luke Musgrave. Week 1 is going to be a huge opportunity for him. So that's why he's my Leap Spirits X Factor.
Yeah, I hope you're right. He complements the X Factor I'm going to pick very well. While you were going and rounding up your dog, I mentioned, Musgrave, if he has some opportunities to stretch this Bears defense over the middle, really soften up that second level, I really like what Jayden Reed could potentially give you on some crossing patterns over the middle. I don't think that as talented as this Bears linebacker core is, bringing in Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. You said it. Those aren't the speediest guys. I really like Jayden Reed. I've loved him since the moment we drafted him. I've been like his number one fan of the Packers, as you know. But this week in particular, it's going to be such a key component because particularly if Watson can't play or Dobbs doesn't play or is extremely limited, we're going to have to find some ways to create some openings and some mismatches if we're going to win this game in the pass game. And it may not mean we've got to go out and get someone that's going to get 150 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. But I think Musgrave is certainly a very big potential X factor in the pass game, regardless of whether we have those guys out there. And I think Jayden Reed is another one that if we're going to be effective offensively, I think a big piece of that will be his ability to find some openings across the middle on some of those crossing patterns, playing off of what Musgrave is going to do, playing off of the pressure that Aaron Jones puts on those guys on the boundaries and in the flat. And so I know he's a young player. He's extremely talented, had a couple of drops in that last game of the preseason, but I think he's going to be ready to go on Sunday. I'm expecting him to get in the end zone, fall in the end zone this week, maybe pick up 4 or 5 receptions, get in that 50 to 60 yards receiving range, and just generally wreak some havoc and make some impact at maybe not like a wide receiver 1 level, but if he gives us that this week, Dane, I think that could make a big difference in the Packers being able to go out in Chicago and pull out a victory here in week 1.
Wags, you're getting me hyped. I'm getting hyped, man. It's Thursday. I want it to be Sunday, man. So folks, it's again, we're Lombardi's Legends Podcast. If you're watching us live on any of our streams going on right now, a lot of y'all I know listen to the actual podcast form. But we do these previews and we wrap them up every year or every week with one of my favorite things, which is score predictions. Wags, I'm going to give you the honors. You let me do the Leap Spirits X Factor. I'm going to give you the honor. Who you got winning this football game? What's the score this week?
Well, Dean, for those of you that have followed us over the years know we basically have never picked against the Packers. I think maybe I've done it one time in the entire time we've been doing this podcast. It's certainly not going to be a theme starting here week 1 in Chicago. I've got the Packers pulling it out 20-16 in Chicago. I think this is going to be a close game. It's going to be a low scoring game. I've got a lot of confidence that this defense can force a couple of turnovers in this game, win the turnover battle. Even if we cough it up once, I think we can come out ahead there. And I really feel like we can set the tempo in the trenches in this game, keep Chicago from really opening it up. I know they've got a lot of folks that are optimistic that this is going to be a more explosive offense, but I don't think it happens here in week 1. I'm really looking forward to seeing the Packers set the tone that this is a team that has an identity from week 1. We didn't see it until about week 11 last year. We spent the first 10 weeks of the season talking about this Packer team not having an identity or having an identity crisis. I think they have an identity right now. They've worked that out. They know who they are. They know how they need to go out and win football games. They can go out and win close games with not a rookie, but a first-year starting quarterback in Jordan Love. They don't need to rely on him to play, hero and win the games in the fourth quarter. They've got guys in all 3 phases of this game that can contribute. And I think the Packers go out, dash some Bears fans' hopes right off the bat. Packers are still kings of the North. We're coming in and we're stealing one in week 1, and that gets our season started with one in the left-hand column.
Wags, we will be insufferable if the Packers can go down to Chicago and win this football game. I love the prediction, and I'm close. We're very close. I got the Packers winning this game too, because I think Jordan Love's a pretty darn good quarterback. Wouldn't you know it? I think the Packers win 26-24. And Anders Carlson hit some field goals along the way. So I think the Packers
4
defense
field goals for Anders Carlson, or is there going to be a missed extra point in there?
You know what? Well, I think he's got the ability for 4, and I'll tell you why. I think the Packers defense is going to be giving the Packers some short field to play with. We haven't talked much about Keyshawn Nixon in the return game, but I'm eager to see this Packers special teams build off of last year. I'm excited to see Daniel Whalen punt that ball and pin the Chicago Bears deep in their own territory. I really do like what the Packers are doing here. And because of that, I expect to be some hiccups along the way on the offense. It's such a young offense right now. So we might see some stalled drives or, some 3 and outs. And we're going to have to rely on some of those kicks. And I'm expecting Anders Carlson to go out there and do his job and hit some of those field goals from short yardage. So I think the Packers win 26-24. We're biting our fingernails the entire game, but the Packers somehow find a way to will it out, and they go to 1-0 in the season.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully we're both right in some form or fashion. Dane, the key thing is not how close we are in our score predictions, but how close we are in the outcome predictions. So, folks, Thanks so much for joining us. As Dane mentioned, now that we're in regular season, we'll be doing this podcast twice a week, a recap at the start of the week, preview here Thursday nights every week, unless we're in a bye. So please continue, follow along, share us. We appreciate you. Come join us live on those nights, Monday, Thursday nights. Typically, we'll be recording around 7:30 Central. Pop your questions into the chat. We'll be trying to make sure that we pay attention to those reactions, particularly Reaction Mondays in the chat as we go through the season. So as always, be legendary and go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go Pack Go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will